Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new, my name is Emmanuel, and today we're going to be learning about CollectionView's compositional layout. Now, many of you guys had requested this in the past, so hopefully I answer your questions, all right? And if you don't have experience working with collection views, I'd highly recommend that you just pause this video and head over and watch my video on collection views. In that video, we used the conventional flow layout, so that's going to give you more context. And it's also going to make you appreciate what we're going to be doing here today. All right. So just go over to the video, watch it, and then come back here. I'll be waiting. All right. So this video is probably going to be long, but I'm going to make sure that I, give descriptions of various sections of the video and what I'm going to be doing. So if I am talking too much or explaining something you already know, just go ahead and skip and just watch whatever section you want. But I would say that every section is going to contain, tips or information that's going to help you further or more easily understand this compositional layout, because it can get messy or it can get confusing. So we're just going to take things slow. And by the end of this video, you're going to be a master that's able to build this layout and even more complex layout. All right, so let's get right into it. So the first thing we're going to do is to head over to our main.storyboard, and here we're going to add a UI collection view. So just hold down Command, Shift, and L, and then collection view. We're going to drag this right in here. Awesome. Now we're going to add constraints to all the corners by clicking this and 0, 0, 0, 0, enter. Now the next thing we're going to do is to add a UI image. So UI image, and we're going to drag that into our cell. So click and then add constraints to all the corners again, just like that. Awesome. Finally, we're going to make this aspect fill. So make sure you are in the identity inspector and aspect fill. Awesome. Finally, we're going to have to create outlets for these guys to our view controller. So just go ahead, click on the assistant editor, and then we're going to connect the UI collection view by holding down Control, click and drag, then say collection view, just like that. Awesome. Next, we're going to have to add the delegate. So make sure collection view is selected and click on this, click on data source, and then delegates. And you can also add this by code by saying collection view.delegate and .data source equal to self. All right, good. So now that we have both of these sets, we're also going to have to create or implement the protocol. So extension, view controller, and we're going to conform to UI collection view delegate and UI collection view data source, right? But the data source is most important here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have to get the number of items in section, and we're going to return 0 for now, but we're going to return something else later. And secondly, we're going to have to implement the cell for item at index path, all right? And we're going to get to this in a bit. But the next thing we also need to do is to basically connect our collection view cell to, or basically create an outlet for that. So we're going to create a class and call this my collection view cell. This is going to conform to UI collection view cell, just like that. And then we're going to need to create an outlet for the UI image. So I'm just going to click on this and drag. Why this guy? Oh yeah, we need to set the identity. So copy the class name, or you can just go over to the UI collection view cell, go to the identity inspector, paste that or type whichever one. And then for the UIs identifier, just go ahead and click on this. All right. So now we should be able to click on this guy, click and drag. Oh, still not going. What is wrong? XCode, are you messing with me? And go back, click on this. Just go here and make sure. So my collection view cell. I'm clicking multiple times in case XCode is slow. And it's the same thing over here. So click on this, click and drag. What is wrong? Do something. Paste. Oh, can you imagine? I think this is a bug with XCode because I just cut and paste and it worked. Anyhow, just hold down Control, click and drag. Hopefully you didn't have the same issues I just did. And we can call this cell image view, all right? So this is basically a reference to our image view. Next, I think we're done with all the references. We can now go into our, and actually just do one thing. I'm just gonna click on the collection view and I'm gonna say, in the estimated size, I'm just gonna say none. So don't guess the size or anything, just use whatever I give to you. Good, so now we're done with our main.storyboard. We can go over to our view controller, and here we're gonna create our setup function that basically allows us to be able to basically set up the cell. So func, and we're gonna call this setup, and in the setup, we're simply gonna pass in an image of type UI image, and we're gonna say cell image view.image is gonna be equal to image, all right? So that's basically what we're gonna be doing here. Now, the next thing we need to do is to use this cell whenever we are reusing or creating, well, the cell. So here, we're gonna do something. But before we get to that, I'm just gonna add our assets, okay? So there are a couple of images that I have, and if we go over to, I'm just gonna open up assets, and if we go over to my desktop, I have a folder called dogs, so I'm just gonna bring that in here, and these are basically just 11 images of dogs, all right? And I'm gonna actually leave a link to all these pictures in the description. So if you want to use the same images, yeah, you can do that. Otherwise, you can just go ahead and download whatever images you want and then populate that, okay? So these are my images, and I'm just gonna go, and if you look at this, I have them arranged in basically in sequence, so 1 to 11. So I'm gonna create a data source, or our items, if you will. So here I'm gonna say private let, and I'm gonna call this images, and these images are going to be an array of UI image, all right? Now, what I want to do is I want to create an array of 11 numbers because, like I said, we have all our images arranged from 1 to 11. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say array. So I'm creating an array of 1 to 11, right? So this is going to create an array of numbers from 1 to 11. Next, we want to say .map, and we basically want to convert these numbers to an image, or basically get the image, name these numbers. So we're going to say this is going to be equal to UI image named, and they're going to be named string because initially it's a number. So it's going to be named string and $0. Okay. Now this I'm sure exists. So I'm just going to add the force unwrap to basically force this to be a UI image. So this, again, I know it looks a little bit complicated, but I'm basically saying create numbers from 1 to 11, all right? Then create an image reference using each number as the name. So the first loop is going to be 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, all the way to 11. And it's going to get us these images. So 1, 2, 3, 4, just like that, all right? So that's basically what is happening over here. So this image, or the images, are going to be our data source. So this is going to be images.count, and here we're basically going to say let cell be equal to collection view DQ reusable cell with identifier. Remember, we set the identifier to be this, so I'm just going to put this in quotes, and the index path is going to be that as this, all right? Then here we're going to return cell. And again, if you don't have any ideas what I'm doing here, I explained all of these things in the video, so you can just go ahead and watch that, all right? So finally, we're just going to say cell.setup, and what's the image we want to set up with? We want to say images, and we're going to be saying index path. Oh, why the suggestions are wrong? Index path.row, all right? Now, what we can do is we can go ahead and run this application, and we should see a couple of images of some beautiful dogs displayed in a collection view, all right? Awesome. So we have all of these things displayed, and this looks good, all right? Now, when we want to, in our last video, we did something where we had like 2 images or 2 columns, so 2 images per row. And from that video, we had to do a couple of calculations where we had to say, okay, the view of the screen has this particular width, and then we divide by 2 and, you know, account for the margins and all those things, right? But with compositional layout, you're gonna see just how sweet and simple this is gonna be, all right? So what we're gonna do is right in our view.load, or right here, first of all, we're going to basically create a function that allows us to create our compositional layout, right? So I'm just gonna say private func create, let's call this a create layout. And this is going to return a value of type UICollectionViewCompositionalLayout, just like that, all right? Then in here, there are four things that we need to keep in mind, right? The first thing is when you're dealing with a compositional layout, 1, you need to have an item, okay? 2, you need to have a group. 3, you need to have a section. And finally, you need to return it, right? Because we're returning this, okay? So we need to basically be aware of all of these things. Now, what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna say collectionView.collectionViewLayout is going to be equal to create layout, all right? So we're gonna do our layout or create our layout over here, and then we're gonna assign it to our collection view, right? Make sense? Good. Now, what exactly are all these things? The first thing we have is the item, and it's quite self-explanatory. It means the item. So this basically is what your container is, or where your design, if you will. Oh, let's just go to the Windows storyboard. When you look at this, this is your item, okay? So that's your item. Now, the next thing we have is group, and group basically is a collection of items. And you're gonna see just how powerful this concept of groups is. But basically you have multiple items with multiple or different dimensions or sizings, and those items are in a group. So you can have one group that has 2 items. One is like 60% big and the other is 40% big, right? So this is one group, multiple items, okay? Now, section is a collection of groups. So you have multiple sections, each section have their own groups, all right? Finally, we just have to return. So whatever we've created, we want to return a collection view compositional layout, all right? Now, this is just a quick breakdown of what these various items are, and we're gonna see just exactly how they work, right? But what we want to do first of all is basically try to replicate what we had in the original video, which is like 2 cells per row. So 2 cells per row. So first of all, let's create an item. How do we do that? I'm just going to say let item be equal to ns collection layout item. And this takes a couple of parameters, but we're going to be taking the one that has the layout size. Now, let's go ahead and click on this and create an instance of this. Now, when we look at the layout size, let me just go ahead and make some more room here. So this is good, okay? So when we look at the layout size, it composes of 2 things, the width and the height, all right? So basically we're specifying the width and the height of a specific item. Now, when we look at this, we see that this is actually an enum that has a couple of options. So we can specify fractional height or absolute height, fractional width, estimated value. And we're actually going to play around with some of them, but just to give you a very quick description of what they are is fractional height is the height is going to be a certain fraction of the height of its container. And this actually goes from 0 to 1. So think of 0 to 1 as 0 to 100%. So if I were to specify a fractional height of 1, it means that the width of this particular item is going to be the full height. It's going to be equal to the full height of its container, all right? Now, don't worry too much about this. We're going to see it in action, all right? Now, the same thing works for fractional width. So if I were to say fractional width of 1, it means that the width of this item is going to be exactly the same as the width of its container, all right? So that's that. So that's for fractional width and fractional height. We also have, let's click, and we have absolute, just like this. And absolute basically means we give it a fixed constant, and that's what it's going to be. So I can say, you can see it accepts CG float. So I can say that the absolute width is 100, and then it will be like 100 pixels, all right? You can say like 300, and it's going to be 300, right? Then the last one is the estimated, and basically it's just you specifying what the estimated dimension is going to be in float, and it's still going to adjust itself to make sure that it matches the content. All right, so this is just giving like an estimate, and then Xcode helps you figure out the exact value. All right, so that's what this is going to be. But for our case, we're just going to use fractional width, and we want this to be 1, so 100% of the width. I want the item to fill its container. The same thing I want for the height, so I'm just going to say that fractional height, and I'm going to specify this as 1. So again, fill your container. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to specify or create a group. So I want to have a group that contains certain items, and the items that I want it to contain is this item here. So what we're going to say is let group be equal to NS collection layouts group, and then we need to specify the basically like the alignment. So not alignment like this, whatever the word is, but do you want it to be a vertical group or you want it to be a horizontal group? Now I want this to be a horizontal group because I want to have in a group, right? We have a group. I want to have 2 items. So 1 item here, 1 item here. They are horizontally aligned. If I wanted them on top of each other, then I would use the vertical, right? So then it will be like this. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and select horizontal, but then there are 2 options over here. We have one that has like sub items, and we have one that has sub item and count. Now we're going to see the difference in action later on, but for now we're going to use sub item and count. Okay, now each group also needs to have its own dimension or its own layout size. So we're going to go ahead and click on this, open your brackets. And the same exact concept works just as we did here, like for the width dimension and height dimension of the item, we have to do the same for the group. So we're gonna get to this in a bit, but then we're gonna have the sub item, we're gonna have the count. Now for the sub item is basically what items do we want to add, or what item do we want to add to the group? So I want to add this item that I created over here, so I'm just gonna say item. Now, the next question is, how many of this item do I want to be in this horizontal group? And the answer is 2. So I just want 2 items. So 2 items stacked horizontally in a group, right? That's the layout that we're basically creating over here. And that's actually one of the difference between this and the other option. For this option, we're specifying 1 item, and we're able to basically duplicate that item. So the measurements, the dimensions, everything about that item is going to be replicated X amount of times, all right? Now, we're done with this, the sub items and the counts. The next thing we want to do is to specify the width. Now, just like I said, the width and the height dimensions are basically the same concepts as this. So, but the only difference is the container of the group is going to be its own container. And in this particular case, the container is going to be our collection view. So if I specify the width dimension to be dot fractional width of 1, this means that it's going to be 100% of the collection view, right? Then for the height, if I say fractional height of 1, it's going to be like 100% the collection view's height, all right? So I'm going to show you this. This is not what we want, but I'm just going to show you what it looks like. So finally, we have our group created. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to say let section, be equal to NS collection layout section, and section basically just a group. So just go ahead and pass the group that we want. Finally, we want to return the layout. So we're going to say return UI collection view compositional layout, and it takes in a section, and we just basically pass in this section over there. All right, and just like that, I can go ahead and run this, and we should see 2 items or 2 columns per row, and each row is going to be the height of the collection view. So let's see whether or not that is the case. Awesome. So you can see over here, we have 2, just like we said, we have 2 items here. And it is exactly the height of the collection view. So the collection view is from here all the way to the bottom of the screen. And you can see that it is exactly that height, right? So we don't want this, right? We don't want this at all. And let me show you something. If I were to rotate my device, You're gonna rotate, friend? Oops. You can see that it's still the height of the collection view. So this is it, and it basically just adjusted. Now, if you were using like the flow layout, this is gonna be incredibly, like you have to do calculations to get this particular effect. But basically this just adapts because we set it to be 100% of the height, right? So I'm just gonna go back to portrait, and then let's actually change something. So now I don't want my group to be 100% of the screen. I want it to be maybe 0.3, 30% of the screen. So I'm gonna say 0.3 like this. And now if I run this again, you're gonna notice that each row is going to be just 30% of the entire screen. So we run again, and voila, just like that. You can see how very easy it is to create this kind of layout. So this is that, and when you rotate, you can see that it is still 30% of the height. Now, in case you don't want this, but you want it to have a fixed height, this is when your absolute height is gonna come in. So here in our group, we can say, I don't want it to be 30%, but I want it to be an absolute height of, let's say maybe 200. And now we can go ahead and run this. And so you can see we have it like this, but so we have 4 in this screen. If I were to rotate this, you can see that we have 2. So it didn't shrink in any way. The height remained 200, but the width adjusted, okay? So that's basically what this is about. Good, so now one thing we can do, I'm just gonna take it back to 30%. We can add spacings or like paddings to our items so that there's, you know, that slight margin difference between them. So what we can do is just basically say item.content insets, and this is going to be, you can see what the type is. It expects NS directional edge insets. So just say equals NS directional edge insets, and then we can basically specify paddings for the top, leading, bottom, and trailing. So in this case, I'm just going to use 1 across because I want it to be equal spacing, or equal, yeah, spacing. So just go ahead and run this again, and you're going to see how easy this is going to look. Very pretty. Voila, very simple. Just absolutely amazing. Now this is simple, this is okay. You could say, I could do this with flow layout and I don't mind the calculations, that's completely fine. But now you're gonna see even greater power of the UI collection view compositional layout when we try to build a staggered display. So let's get to it. Now, in order for us to build a staggered kind of display where we have like different number and sizings of items and different rows and all those things, it can get really messy if we were to try and do that here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna create a separate structure outside of this file that we're gonna basically create like helper functions, all right? So what we're gonna do is right here, we're gonna create a new file, and I'm gonna call this file Compositional Layout, all right? So that's gonna be the name of the file. And we're actually gonna create a struct here called Compositional Layout. And this struct is gonna give us a couple of static methods, right? So the first thing, remember, when we're dealing with compositional layouts, we need item, we need group. And for the section and the layout itself is pretty simple to create, so we're not gonna go into that. But for the layout, or for the item, we're gonna say static func create item. And this is going to return a value of type NS collection layout item. All right, good. So we had to import UIKit, so you can remove foundation. So this is what this is going to return. So we're going to say let item be equal to, I want to create an NS collection layout item, okay? And this, we're gonna take the layout size, right? And we're gonna just open our brackets like this. And these are the things that we wanna pass in. So we wanna pass in width and a height dimension. And they both should be of this particular type. So here, I'm gonna say width should be of type this. height should be of type this. And here, we're just gonna say width. And here we say height, right? Now there's one more thing that we wanna add, which is basically the spacing. So we want to be able to also specify the spacing when we're trying to create an item. So this takes in NS directional edge inset, but we're gonna do this just to keep things simple again. We're going to basically just pass in a single number. So let's move this to the next line so that it's easy to see. So here, we're going to basically pass in, we can call this spacing. And this is going to be of type CG float. All right. Then here, we're going to say in the next line, we're going to say item.content inset equals, but now we're not going to pass in 1, we're going to pass in spacing. So spacing, and this is basically assuming that we want the same spacing across, right? So you can definitely make this function better by, you know, allowing them pass in like dynamic spacings for dynamic positions. But that's basically it. So now we're done. We can basically just return item, right? So now that we have this function to do this for us, we can go back to our view load, and rather than doing both of these lines here, what we would do is, let's just remove this. We're gonna say compositional layout dot create item. This is gonna take in the width and the height and the spacing. So for the width, we just say dot fractional width, which is basically like what we did before. And the height is going to be the fractional height of 1, and the spacing is going to be 1. All right. Now, if we were to run this, you'd see that we would have the exact same thing. But then we have basically just kept things a little bit cleaner, just a tiny bit cleaner. And you're not going to appreciate it now, but you're going to appreciate it when you're doing like more complex layouts. Okay, so you can see no changes. This looks good. We still have the spacings. Awesome. So the next thing we want to do is we want to do this for the group. But the group is going to be a little, just a teeny bit different, because for the group, we can basically create horizontal or vertical group. So what we're going to do is head over here, and we're going to create a static function. So we're going to say static func create group. And the group, first, we're going to have the alignment. But for the alignment, we're going to create an enum to basically just hold the case, or like the type of alignment that we have. So here I'm going to say what am I writing? Enum compositional group alignment. Whatever name works for you guys. So here we're just going to have 2. We're going to have vertical. And we're gonna have horizontal. Awesome. So this is an alignment or the direction we're gonna pass in. So just copy this and paste that right here, okay? Second, let's actually just create it and see what we need. But for this part, we're gonna need to return a value of type NSCollectionViewLayout group. Perfect. Now, for the group, like I said, there are 2 types of groups that we want to make. The first one is horizontal, second is vertical. So I'm going to say switch, and I want to switch the alignment. So the alignment is either vertical or horizontal. Now for the vertical group, we're going to return NSCollectionLayoutGroup.vertical. Okay? And this is going to take in the layout size and the sub items. Don't worry, we're going to get to the one where we have like the item and the count, all right? But we're just trying to create a reusable function, so don't worry too much. Step by step, breathe. So the layout size is going to basically be like what we have here, where the user can pass in the width and the height. So I'm just going to copy both of that, and we're going to paste those here, okay? So here, for the layout size, we're going to do like this. And for the width, we just say width, and the height, we just say height. All right, we can move this to the next line. Good. Now the next thing we need here is this sub item. So that's the next thing we're going to need to pass in. So here, I'm just going to say sub, or just say items. And this is of type NSCollectionLayoutItem. So and it's an array. So I'm just gonna paste it like this, just like that. Then here, I'm just gonna change this to items, all right? So this is basically a way for us to create a group that takes in items, all right? Now I can copy this and we're gonna do the exact same thing, but for the vertical, we're gonna change to horizontal. Perfect. And this function is done. And again, don't worry, I'm gonna show you what this means when we're doing like items instead of count, okay? But then there's one more function that we need to make, and that is basically to create group, but this time it's not gonna be taking items, but it's gonna be taking the item and then count. Remember, we use item and count when we wanna use one item multiple times. But when we wanna use multiple items or multiple configurations of items, then we use items, okay? And I'm gonna show you in a bit. But basically we're gonna do the same thing or quite similar. So I'm just gonna copy that and paste. But the difference here is that for item, we're gonna take an item, and this is not gonna be an array. And then we're gonna take in the count, okay? And this is gonna be int. All right, then here, we're gonna pass in item, or sub item rather, which is going to be item. And finally, we're gonna pass in count, which is gonna be count. All right, so I'm basically gonna copy this and this, and we're gonna replace this. All right, so I think that is all. Let me just move this to this line. Good. Okay, so let me just go through it one more time. I apologize for the confusions here, but basically we created a group, right? This one already explained, that takes in items, right? And the items is basically just passed in the sub items. But the difference in this one is here we're passing in, is the same function name, but here we pass in item and a count. And here we have the vertical, we have horizontal, and here the sub item is the item, the count is the count, all right? So these are all the helper functions that we need for now. And again, you can always go ahead and make this even better, but this is gonna do for our example. But now I wanna show you exactly what the difference is between both of them. Now you see how we have one item, and we basically, because we have the same design here, we just used item and we put a count. So in this case, if we wanted to use our helper, we'd say compositional layout.create group, and we would use this one that has the item and the count. So for the alignment, I want horizontal, right? For the width, I want it to be basically fractional width, and the height, I want to be fractional height of, and actually you can use fractional width if you want. If you want it to be, if you want the height to be based off of a percentage of the width, you can do that. But I'm just gonna say 0.3 for the height, and the item, we want item, and the count we want 2, right? So if we go ahead and run this again, we should still have the exact same thing happening. Okay, so everything looks good. And if I wanted to increase the count, so I want 3 items in the same, in one group, then I'll just increase the count and it's gonna work. Okay, so this is gonna be 3 items per row. Awesome, so that's it. But if I wanted to use the other method that we created that takes in an array of items, what I would do is here, I would say items, and I'm gonna have to pass in an array of items. So it means that if I wanted to have 2 items per row, I would paste this twice. So if I run this, then we will see that we have 2 items per row. And actually this didn't work because what we said here is that the width should be 100% of the screen. But in this case, we're actually displaying 2 items side by side. So what we have to do is, this cannot be 100%, but it now has to be 50%. So each item is going to be half the width of the screen. So this one is going to be 50%, this one's going to be 50%. So if we go ahead and do that, we're going to see that we have 2 items. Awesome. So that's us using items. So items is mostly used when you want to have like different configurations of an item, or is better to use them when you have different configurations for each item and you want them to be in one group. But if you're going to be having like the same spacing or the same configurations generally, like I want this item to basically be one, like it should be full, but I want to have multiple of this in one group, then it's best for you to just use the item and then how many of that you want, all right? But if you want to have different, then you use the items, okay? So we've spent a lot of time basically explaining how we can create the 2x2 or 2x or 3x kind of layout, but how exactly can we create like a staggered layout where one is bigger than the other, there's multiple sections or multiple rows in one column and all those things, right? How do we do that? It's very simple, okay? So what we need to do is right here, the same way we're adding an item and an item, right? What we need to do is we need to add items and groups, or groups and groups. So basically what that is here we have an item that is basically the width and the height of its container, right? Let's say we want to we want a horizontal, so we want a horizontal group, and in the horizontal group we have one item. So the first item is going to be half. We want that to be half the width of the view. How do we do that? We want to make it half. You come over here and say 0.5. Okay, very simple. So I want it to be half the screen, and then for the other half, I don't want to have an item there because that's what we currently have. Here we have two items, right? This item and this item, both of them are 50% of the screen. So they're basically displayed like that. But now I don't want this second item to be an item. I want it to be a group, a vertical group that contains two items, okay? That's basically what we want to do here. So how do we do that? First of all, we have to create the group. So I can just say let vertical be equal to compositional layout dot create group. And something to just keep in mind while you're choosing whatever function is, do you want to have one item that will be reused? If you want to have one item that will be reused, that basically share the configuration, then you can use the one that has the count. But if you're going to be having dynamic kind of stylings, then you would use the items, all right? So now I want a vertical group that basically has the same type of items, but they're just vertically aligned, equal spacing. So I'm going to use the one that has the items and count. Now for the alignment, I want to create a vertical. I want to create a vertical stack, vertical alignment, and the width, I want the width to be basically 50%. So remember, we're trying to create this group to be in the same group as the item. So the item already contains 50%. The other one needs to contain 50%. If not, it's going to either overlap or be like have weird spacings. So the width is going to be fractional width of 0.5. And the height of this group, now I want the height of the group to basically fill its container. So I'm going to just say the fractional height is going to be 0.1. Oops, fractional height. Not 0.1 actually, just 1. So again, I want the height of the vertical group to fill its container. So remember, the container of this is going to be this group because we're going to add it here. So this vertical group, this item is the first image of the dog, okay? Then the second container, the second spacing is going to be this vertical group. So I want it to fill the height, but for the width, it should just be 50%. That's what we're doing over here. The width be 50%, the height fill the container. All right, perfect. Now, what item do we want to pass in? Now, we want to pass in an item that fills its container. Now, we cannot use the same item because this item has a fractional width of 50%. So if we were to use this, it's going to have like, how do we say this? We basically just want the item that we're going to create in this group to fill the entire screen. So what we can do is right here, we're going to say let you can say let full item, and this is me running out of names. But so we're just gonna say full item is gonna be compositional layout dot create item, and the width is fractional width of 1. The height is gonna be fractional height of 1, and the spacing we're just gonna give 1 as well. So remember, we're just trying to create. So this has different configuration than this, so we're gonna be using this one. So we want to use the full item as the item for the vertical group. And how many counts, how many of it do we want? We want only 2. So we want 2 items in this vertical group, okay? Then in our horizontal group right here, we wanna have the item, which is this one, that is 50% of the width. And then the second one we wanna have is the vertical group. So we're not having an item now, we're gonna be having a group of items, a group that has, so this group has, where is it? This item 2 times. Now, this is what it's gonna look like, and it's gonna be very beautiful if I did it right. All right, just like that, very simply, you can see how we've just done this. So again, I just wanna say it one more time so that you don't get overwhelmed. What we have here is, here in this line, we created a group, okay? Now that group is basically this container right here, all right? It's just that container. Now this group is made up of 2 items. The first item is item, which is this guy. And the second item is a vertical group, okay? So this first item, what is it? Let's look at the configurations. The first item is an item that has a width of 50%. So you can see it's exactly in the middle, right? It has a width of 50% and a height of the container. So the height is basically going to be whatever the group's height is. So if I were to reduce the height of the group, of this group right here, then this is basically going to adapt, all right? So that's that. Then the second item is the vertical group, this one, the vertical group, all right? And the vertical group, as we specified here, is going to have, no, not that one, this one, is going to have a fractional width of 50% because we want it to basically be the remaining half of the group, okay? So it's going to be 50% and the height is going to be 1, which is basically going to be the height of its container, okay? But now the difference in this group, it is made up of multiple things. It's made up of an item 2 times. So remember, if we wanted to have dynamic kind of styling, just like we did in this group, then we wouldn't use item and count. We would use items and then specify. So if I wanted this vertical group to maybe have a horizontal group in here, right? Then I would have to pass in a horizontal group and item, right? So basically, just to say again, if you want to have a dynamic configuration for your items, you use item and you specify the individual configurations. But if you want to have one item that is basically generalized or filled equally, if you will, then you got to use the this one and this one. It's going to be easier to use than having to deliberately calculate the width. All right, so that's that. Now look at, just to show you something again, if I were to change this number, what do you think is going to happen? Can you guess? Basically, it's going to have 3 vertical items in the vertical group, okay? Because we increased the count. So here, you're gonna notice that we have 3. So there's 1, 2, 3. And that's just how easy it is, all right? So I'm gonna return this back to 2. And there's one more thing we're gonna do in this video, and that is to add a, I basically want the first image to fill the screen. I want the first image to be just big and like that, right? So what I'm gonna do is, again, I want it to fill the width, but I want the height to be constant, okay? I don't want the height to be fractional height of 1 to fill the container. So I cannot use item. I cannot use full item, right? So I basically wanna have a constant item or a new item for this. So what I'm gonna do is, and actually to keep this or to make this make sense, I'm going to change this to horizontal group. So this is going to be a horizontal group, but we're going to create a new group because this is going to be vertically aligned. Remember, I want to add a new item that goes from the left to the right, okay? And then it has a fixed height. Then under that item, we will now have this horizontal group that we've already created. So a vertical stack, the first item is going to be an item that goes with full screen and the height of maybe 100 or 200. And then the next item is going to be a group that has an item and a vertical group. And the vertical group has items stacked like that, all right? I deliberately want to confuse you, but don't worry, we're going to see what it looks like. So here we have a horizontal group. And what we can do is just remove this comment so it doesn't confuse us too much. And we're going to arrange it later on if we have the time. But we're going to create let. And we can call this, I don't want to use vertical group again, even though it's going to be vertical group. I'm just going to use like the main group, okay? And this is going to be compositional layout dot create group. And this time, what am I thinking of? I don't want the same configurations. I want different types of items. So I don't want the same type of item to be used multiple times. I want to have multiple items. So I'm going to use the option that has items as an array. Okay, and for the alignment, I want it to be vertical because I want the full width first and then the group, the horizontal group next. So it's going to be a vertical alignment, and the width, okay, so the width, just like I said, I want it to be a fractional width of 1, so fill the screen. But for the height, I want to give it an absolute height. So I can say I want the height to be 100. Right? I can say maybe I want the height to be 100 or 100 like that. And the items, what do we want the items to be? So for the items, the first one I want, what did I just do? Oh, no. That was a mistake. This configuration I'm using here is supposed to be for the item. So pardon me again, guys. I'm so sorry. But what I want to do is I want to create an item that is, so compositional layout dot create item. Now the width is what I meant to do over here, even though this is still going to be correct, but that was me moving way too fast. Now the height, we can specify the height as an absolute height of, you can say like 100, right? Then now that we have this done, we can say the spacing, of course, 1 if we wanted to have the same spacing, or 10 if we wanted to have like bigger spacing. So this, I'm going to say, I can call this, fixed height, no, what am I calling this? Main item, okay? So I'm gonna call this main item. So here, I'm gonna pass in the main item as the first thing, and the second thing is going to be the horizontal group. Okay, so remember this is a vertical stack, so the main item is going to be the first one, and remember the main item has a width of 100% and a height of 100 pixels, right? Then the second one is going to be the horizontal group, and the horizontal group is going to have a fractional height of 0.3, and this is actually going to be a little bit confusing at first, but don't worry, I want us to work through the issues that we're going to encounter, especially when you're trying to deal with fractional height and absolute values. But the best bet is if you're going to be doing, because both of these guys are added to the same group, right? And we want the alignments to match. We always want them to match, okay? So if I'm going to be using main item as, if one of the group has the height as 100, then we need this guy to basically fill up the remainder of the space. So this is saying 0.3, and that's going to be quite messy. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change this to absolute. And then I'm going to say, okay, maybe if this one is 100, maybe we make this one like 400. 400, just like that. Okay. And then, so both of them, this is going to be 400 plus 100, it's going to be 500. And that is going to be the height of this particular group, all right? So now that we have that done, let me just make sure everything is good. Okay, I think so. We can go ahead and change this to main group. And let's go ahead and run this and see what we currently have. All right, where we at? So this is absolutely messed up. So, and I'm sure this is because some things are not correct, but let's see if we can find them. Now this is where things are. Ugh. So we have our main group. The main group is aligned vertically, good. The width is full screen, very good. Now we have absolute value of 100, which is fine. Oh, no, this is not fine. The main group has an absolute value of 500, okay? So remember, this is 100 plus 400. So the absolute remember, it should always match. So I'm gonna go ahead and run this again, and I think this should be the reason why that wasn't properly aligned. So I'm gonna run. Just like that. So you can see that it worked. So this kind of thing can happen from time to time where something just doesn't align and it is crazy to figure out. And that's actually why I did it like this, because it's way easier for you to basically just check through your configurations than imagine you having all these things like collection view, layout size, sub item count, all this blah, blah, blah. You're having all those things inside this function. It's going to be messed up, right? So, but with this, you can see how like easier it was for us to debug. So what I want to do now is, so you can see how here we used absolute value. Now, if we don't want to use absolute value and we want this to basically be dynamic depending on the size of the screen, or like if it's an iPad or a smaller iPhone, then we would want to use like the fractional height, okay? So how do we use fractional height in this case? We can just go ahead and say fractional height. And for the fractional height, what do we want? We need to, basically we're working with the horizontal group and the main item. So we want the height of the horizontal group and the main item, which are the first two stacks or the first two items in the stack, to basically match up to the height of this guy, okay? So here I can say that I want the fractional height to be like 0.5. So the height of the main group, so each group of images should be 50% of the screen, okay? Now we have this. These two guys need to match up to, the addition of both of these guys' fractional heights should match up to this value. So if I want this guy to be like the horizontal group, maybe like 40% of the main container, I would say 0.4, right? So this guy's gonna be 0.4 of the height of the container. Oh, no. I don't want this one to be 0.4. I want this one, the main item. So the main item is the first one. I want it to be smaller. So I'm going to make this one the fractional height of 0.4. And then I want this guy to be the remainder. So what's the remainder? It is 0.6, right? So 0.6 plus 0.4 is going to be equal to 1, right? And 1 is the complete height of the main group. Now the main group's height is the fractional height of 0.5 to the collection view. So it's going to be half of the screen. Now let's go ahead and run this, and it will still look the same. It's just going to be, I think, maybe smaller if the 0.5 is less than 500. Yeah, definitely, it's going to be smaller. So, oh, maybe not smaller. So it looks, I think, very similar, I think. But if we were to rotate this, you can see that it now shrunk. So this is still 0.5. This is the main group. So this is the main group like that. It is 0.5. And inside it, this guy is 40%. So this is 0.4. This guy is 0.6. Okay. Now inside this one, this is the horizontal group. So this is, let's rotate back. Again, this one like this is the main group, right? And the main group, as you can see over here, is made up of two items, the main item and the horizontal group. What is the main item? The main item is basically this guy that has a fractional width of 1 and a height of 0.4. So the fractional width is 1, it fills the screen. 0.4 is the fractional height relative to the entire group, which is this guy, okay? Then the second item is the horizontal group. Now, what is the horizontal group? The horizontal group is this guy over here and the horizontal group is made up of 2 items. So this horizontal group, right, is made up of 2 items. The first one is an item that goes 50% of the width and a height of 100%. That's what we have here, 50% of the width, height of 100%. Then the second item is a vertical group, okay? And the vertical group is 50% of the width here and a height of 100. That's why it matched, right? So 50% of the group, height of 100, okay? Now, what is the horizontal group? The horizontal group is, the vertical group is this full item, okay? 2 times. So that's this guy, the same measurements, we just go all the way, full width, full height, that's why it's like this. But because we're using the item and count, it's basically gonna use the same spacing, the same measurements for everything. So we have 1 item used 2 times, okay? So just like this, if you wanted to add, let's say you wanted to add another partition here, then you can just go over to this one. So that's the vertical group. And you will now use items, not item and count. So you use items, and then you will pass in an item or a group if you want. So you can basically just go deep, and just have some completely nested stuff. But this is basically like, you can see how simple, and I don't know if simple is the best word, but I hope this made sense to you. But it is very simple to implement compared to if you were trying to do this using like flow layouts. Honestly, I don't even know how to do it with flow layouts. But like, this is just absolutely beautiful. So we have the main group, just to say again, the main group. The main group is made up of 2 items. The first item is a full width and a 40% height item. Then the second item is that's the horizontal item. It is full width and a 60%. So 60% plus 40% makes 100% of the group, all right? Now, inside of the group, we have, or inside of this horizontal item, we have an item and a vertical item, all right? And this is basically just how you can go nested in and basically create whatever kind of complicated design that you wanted to do. And again, let's say you wanted to add like different spacing. Let's say I wanted the separate ones to maybe have like 10 or something. And even though it's gonna be better to be vertical, not horizontal included, but again, you can basically improve the function. But with that, I can just come over to this main one and say I want the spacing here to be 10, right? So what this is going to do is for every main item, it's going to give 10 spacings to the top, to the left, to the right, and to the bottom. And again, this doesn't even affect like your calculations that you had done before. It just knows what to do. So you can see that there's more spacing, 10, 10, 10, 10, like that. But if you wanted to do this with flow layout, I promise you, you're gonna regret it. So anyhow, this is what I wanted to show you guys in this video. I really hope that this made sense to you, but if anything is confusing, go ahead and ask in the comment section. There's one more thing I'm going to show you, just one more video I'm going to make about the compositional layout, which is to basically have like, basically to replicate the Yummy homepage app, because in the Yummy we use multiple collection views, but you're going to see how we're going to do it even better and easier with, what's it called? UICollectionViewCompositionalLayout. All right. So again, if you have questions, go ahead and ask me. If you have recommendations, you can also let me know. I'll definitely listen to it. And until the next video, you guys enjoy the beautiful images of these beautiful dogs. Ah, so cute. Just look at this fat boy. Anyhow, bye guys.